probably will date back to a time when we were not the only humans on Earth. We were, the Homo sapiens, but there was, still Neanderthal, there was still Denisovich, I'm probably saying that wrong, but the people that, the folks from the Himalayas inherited the genes that allowed them to function so well at high altitudes, and the hobbits from Flores, all of these different subhumans, and maybe even other species, possibly extraterrestrials, possibly indigenous to Earth, coexisted in civilizations that we can't fathom, and maybe they were just better at being biodegradable. Maybe the reason we don't have a lot of archaeological evidence is because, unlike us, they were pretty damn good at recycling. Or maybe it's buried so deep that we just haven't found it yet. Or maybe there's evidence of it in Antarctica. I was about to say Atlantis. In Antarctica, and now that it's cracking up, it will reveal some of these deeply hidden pyramids and other pieces of technology. But that, to me, is one of the most misunderstood things in the scientific world. I don't know where I stand on the ancient alien theory. I think it's a very fascinating set of theories, and I have no reason not to subscribe to the idea that we have been visited in the past, because there is some compelling evidence. But what I am much more intrigued by is what those creatures, specifically humans, but maybe other species of human and other creatures that live on the Earth, and the kind of civilizations, the kind of heights they achieved in a time so far removed that we can't even fathom it. And I really hope there is at least some scant evidence of that, and I think with the technology we're developing, we may live to see at least a hint of that. And what will happen once that happens is what always happens. It's not so much going to turn the academic world on its ear as they will absorb it, as they always do, and then set the bar somewhere else. They'll say, this is the absolute end-all, be-all, and nothing else can be there. It's the same thing that they did when they discovered the coelacanths in the early 20th century in South Africa, where it's like, this, nothing that old can exist, but this can, but nothing else can. So that's the beautiful thing, is that once it's established, it'll be a part of the textbooks, but the tragic thing will be is that the minds won't get any more open because of that. They'll just seal off again and say, and that's the maximum.
Oh yeah. You couldn't say it any better. But I will say one thing: Antarctica. The way, maybe another 10 years down the road, wouldn't it be interesting? Not just the pyramids. If they find any ruins in the pyramid, is going to really shoot how we got here. It's going to shoot it down.
It was tropical once. I mean, they definitely know that this was not always, the end of the world and just a frozen wasteland. They have evidence of the tropical plants that were there. And then there's the Piri Reis map that copy of an ancient map that shows the actual landmass of Antarctica before it was frozen over, which is what makes it so fascinating and interesting to scholars of both the unknown and legitimate, cartographers. And so if there was somebody that could actually map it the way it looked before it was frozen, and it could support life as it did, I mean, at least it had tropical plants and stuff. They found samples of that in like the deep taken core samples. Then there's no reason to think that there couldn't have been evidence of civilization there. And if it's going to be preserved somewhere, I mean, the rest of the Earth has been built over and upheaval, but if this got frozen over, then this might be just like a picture, like sort of like the mosquito and amber at the beginning of Jurassic Park. Like this could be a flash frozen slice of a very ancient civilization that we've had no idea about. So I really, really do hope that A, discoveries like that are made, and B, if they are made, they're made by a source that will not try to conceal it.
Well, look, it was on the news here recently. They found a prehistoric bison or whatever, or where it originally came from. It thawed out, and, it's been buried for tens of thousands of years. And they actually said it was pretty much well preserved. Even the meat on it, was preserved. If when this starts melting more and more, I mean, if all of a sudden they start seeing, evidence where, some type of civilization was, I think then we need to restructure how everything. I will get into religion just for a split second. Everybody, humans have to have always believed in some type of God, be it the fire god, the god of the mountain, Jesus, and and God and all that. people have had to believe in some type of God that kept them going through, of hardness, through whatever they had to go through in their life. People have to believe in something. Wouldn't it be really interesting if we've been believing in God and found out our God was from another planet, another solar system, or a race of aliens or anything weird like that?
I mean, what is God but a creator? I mean, yes, there's the deification elements. I was raised Roman Catholic and went to parochial school. I did the whole 9 yards. So the idea of a divine entity is not one that I'm a stranger to. But if you want to just parse it down to the idea of if we were created, genetically modified from creatures that already lived here or introduced by a foreign species, I mean, I do think it's fascinating that the history of the modern human is one that kind of spontaneously arises. Yes, we have many, many connections to other proto-humans. It's not like we appeared fully formed and, ready to go. But there are real indications that the genetics were pretty quickly modified to become what we are now. If that was done by an extraterrestrial influence, and we were created in their image, which is a classic, at least, tenet of the Abrahamic faith, that we were creating in the image of the God, if this God were extraterrestrial and a scientist and not necessarily an ultimate divine entity, but just a biological creature of great advanced technology that wanted to create something of itself on this new world, well, that would be utterly fascinating. And that's something I think we would want to get to the bottom of. And if this species still existed, boy, would we love to contact it. I don't think it would destroy the idea of divinity for a lot of people. A lot of people say everything from, like, if, say, the government disclosed the existence of UFOs, that religions would crumble around the world. I think that's poppycock. People will turn to faith if that is what they take comfort in, if that is what they truly believe. Nothing will dissuade them from that. In fact, they will turn towards it more passionately if they're unsure of their footing in other places.
Oh, yeah.
But that having been said, if we are the spawn of something extraterrestrial, those that still have faith in a grand divine thing will still say, all right, well, then this divine thing created our creators. But boy, I would love to know, and boy, I would be fascinated to pick their brains. And it's like that movie Prometheus. I mean, you'd hope it's not that nightmarish scenario where they don't care for us and want us to die, but like to find your creators and actually be able to speak to them. Well, isn't that the ultimate dream of humanity?
If they could understand what we're even saying.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what if they we're advanced enough with our studies of genetics to maybe not create a brand new life form, but to create something pretty close to it. That doesn't mean that if that thing evolved, we would have the capacity to understand it. We might be overestimating the power of our creators in that we assume, well, people that are, religious assume that it's an all-knowing, all-seeing, hopefully hyper-benevolent entity. But if it's just a scientifically advanced biological creature that is just slightly more advanced than us and was able to create us, that would not necessarily just be disappointing, but it would be very difficult to wrap your head around. Like, oh, you're just this much smarter. You're just this much more developed in your civilization, and shit, we can't really talk to you. Excuse my language. That would be again. It would be a reality I would want to know. It would be a reality that I would very much want to explore, but it would be a shame if we couldn't communicate. I would like to think they would be far enough up so that they could figure out a way. In the same way that I hope someday we can talk to dogs.
Well,
I hope we get there.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I think animals digest us more than we can even begin to digest them. I really think they can really read us.
There's really, not only is it, I guess, supreme empathy, but I really do think there is a psychic kind of connection between, especially the domesticated animals, dogs particularly, cats as well to a lesser degree, that we can kind of have something that's more than a mutual affection because of proximity and just the good things we do for each other, and more than just the empathy that especially dogs seem to have for their owners. But I really think that there's something intuitive that goes beyond the norm slightly. I don't know. I haven't really researched it in any great detail, but you really get a sense that, especially, when people are having tough times, that dogs sense it in a way that's just beyond reading your body language. I could be reading too much into it, but I think there is something intriguing in that aspect, that we might have a connection that goes beyond language and goes beyond simply observable traits.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And even going back to, dogs and cats and stuff like that, I really believe in reincarnation. I didn't a few years back, but I've had too many guests on my show that actually I read their books and really got into, the philosophy that I do think it exists. And it seems like it's more pronounced, like young kids, like 3 to 7 years old, kind of remember their past lives. And the reason why I'm saying this, my daughter, when she was a little kid, she was always talking to imaginary friend. And, we would get mad at her and, say it's nobody there. But we had 3 cats. Now, the cats don't lay next to each other. They kind of like spread around in the living room or wherever they're at. They have their own little territory. But she would be sitting on the couch, talking to her friend, and the cats would be looking at something, seeing something, and they'd all be looking at the same area. And I would be looking, and I didn't see nothing, but it seemed like it was more than once that's happened. And then I talked to other people, and they have noticed the same thing, like when they have had young kids and they're talking to their imaginary friends, their dogs or cats are kind of looking off at a certain area, like they're really looking at something that's not there. I don't know if you have ever noticed anything like that.
Oh, my gosh, yes, absolutely. I mean, what is freakier than when you're alone with an animal? I've had cats that did this particularly, and then you just catch them staring up at the corner of the room. And you don't see anything, but they do, and that tail starts slowly flicking back and forth, or worse yet, when you're with a dog, and I remember this happened to me with my Irish setter, Red, God bless him, back in the 70s, just growling at a slightly ajar closet door. You're half hoping that some raccoon or something got in there, because if there's nothing in there, the implications of that are 3 times as terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
So I've absolutely had firsthand encounters with this, and there's every reason to believe not only are their senses much more acute than ours, be it olfactory, eyesight, on, hearing, but that they are able to perceive things in a way that is just much more subtle and profound. I almost think we're lucky as a species, not to go back to the floating hell eels that could be floating around us anytime, but that we are sort of oblivious to a lot of things. We rely on our intellect, we fundamentally rely on our senses, but we are constantly preoccupied with our inner dialogue and the things that we're thinking about and the things that we're doing, that I think if we were to be more relaxed and in tune, maybe we'd be happier as a species, but I think we'd also be exposing ourselves to a lot of things that we probably get used to after a while, but that might be pretty terrifying at first.
Well, how about like you're in your bedroom at night, right? And you're sitting there kind of watching TV, and in the corner of your eyes, you see a shadow come out of the closet or slowly move around the walls. I mean, people have seen stuff like that. When I was a little kid at my grandmother's house in California, or apartment, I would get shipped there during the summertime when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. And I remember I was in her huge little huge bedroom in that apartment. Well, it was huge to me back then. But sure. I remember a shadow coming out of the walk-in closet and going around the whole room and then going back in the closet. And that was really, really terrifying. It got to the point where after that happened, I refused to sleep in that room. I had to sleep on the couch in the living room or the parlor, whatever she called it. But, how many people, even today, adults, are scared to reach under their bed at night?
Oh, totally. And you know what? That is part, maybe the residue of a childhood paranoia, and part, again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, where we have this instinctive fear of snakes and spiders and other things that are dangerous, these dark crevices, these little unknown spaces, be it the closets, be it under the bed, part of it is just the imagination running wild. I'm fully going to concede that, but part of it is, I think,